Welcome everybody to the 2021 DGS virtual gathering. A great shame that we're having to do it virtually and not do it in person, because that's the thing that makes the DGS what it is. However, this is the world we live in, so this is where we are at this moment in time. We have almost 40 people who may well be joining us tonight, besides the people that you can see on the screen at the moment. So let's hope they all manage to connect in without any problems. I must say at the very start here that John and I have to give a huge vote of thanks to Karen and David for their efforts in getting this webinar off the ground. Without them, to put it bluntly, it wouldn't happen. Because John and I aren't that technical, and we rely on Karen and David. So we're here tonight because of the efforts of those two.
Everyone, and I hope that you're enjoying the meeting so far. And it's a wonderful opportunity for our membership around the world to be here without having to leave their own living rooms, which is, I think, is amazing. Now, for those of you who've not met me before, I am the editor of the magazine. I'm also temporarily the joint honorary chairman of the society with Howard Dalton. But my main task tonight is to introduce myself as the editor of the magazine. Now, this is our principal conduit of information between the members, and it's something which I always push quite hard. And I know we've got the website, which is excellent and helps people put up a lot more stuff than we can possibly put in a magazine. But I think there's something about a printed booklet which is, to my mind, perpetual. What I'm always looking for, of course, is more articles, and particularly a variety of articles and pictures for the next issue. And of course, the next one I shall have to start assembling in a few weeks' time. Now, notice I said it's our journal, not my journal. This is a journal for all the society members. We are the ones who contribute to it. I happen to assemble what it is you send me. So without your contributions, I have nothing to put together. There's something I particularly like to see more of, and it should be fairly easy to do. And a good example of it was Karen Preston's piece in the last issue, where she got a handful of family photographs, so we're not talking about a large collection, and had written short descriptions which connected the photographs together. And on the space of 2 pages, she got a mini family history published for members to see. Will be kept for perpetuity in the research in the libraries around the world that keep copies for copyright reasons, or in the case of the Allen Public Library in Indiana and the LDS Library in Utah. Now, you don't have to restrict yourself to 2 pages. You could go deeper, which is something I did many years ago. After my father died, I wrote a short biography of him, and that was published back in volume 21 and 22. So you've got a choice. Or you can have a deeper research piece, maybe a piece that's been published by another magazine elsewhere, because we can usually get permission to publish these again in our magazine. We did that last time with James Clump's article, which I thought was a superbly researched piece of work. I was very pleased to be able to print it. Now, what I might also mention is how things have moved on since the very early days when Michael Neil Dalton, first of all, started a family history circular for his own family. And this was half a century ago. believe it or not. And he put together a little handbook, which he circulated just to the members of his own family. And he did this all by hand. First of all, he had to type up all the pieces. And this is an example of one of his pages, which involved quite a lot of work. And then we've got an example of a family tree, which he again hand drew very neatly, I might add. And of course, he had the good fortune to be able to be working computing at the time. And whilst in those days we didn't have desktop computers, they hadn't even been thought of, they were still the size of a room. So you had a card index, and this is an example of one of his card index pages. And from that he produced, because he had the connection to do so, a punched card. Now you only see these in museums, as David Preston pointed out to me these days, but he ended up with these, and that produced this family tree list, not a family tree as laid out as we understand it these days, but just a list of names and essential dates. And that involved what was in those days a large amount of computing power. And now we can do 1,000 times more than this on a little desktop that you can drop in a briefcase. But it comes back to the same thing. The research still has to be done by the people on the ground, in the libraries, on things like Find My Past and Ancestry. It still depends on you, the members, doing your bit and sending your bits to me for the magazine. Thank you for listening.
Hello, I'm Mark Hutter, one of the tailors here at Colonial Williamsburg. We look forward to welcoming the Dalton Genealogical Society during their annual meeting here next year. We hope while you're here that you take the time to visit our many historic homes and public buildings and working trade shops where we explore and discuss the complex lives of 18th century people. People like John Dalton, a tailor who worked in the area of Fredericksburg and later Petersburg, Virginia. The scant historical record that we currently have of Dalton tells a brief and unfortunate story. A 1783 receipt records that Dalton made clothing for St. George Tucker, or more specifically, for the enslaved men owned by St. George Tucker, men named Anthony, Syphax, and Essex. A complete set of clothes for Essex out of white wool and silk indicates that these men worked in the household and not in the field. They were reflections of the wealth and status of St. George Tucker. Clearly, Dalton was a tailor of good reputation at that time. Unfortunately, circumstances change. In 1803, attempt to collect a debt from the estate of Dalton states that Dalton had later fallen on hard times and hard drink and had died insolvent. The 18th century world is diverse and sometimes difficult. The stories are fascinating, and we hope to be able to share many of them with you during your visit. We'll see you then.
Now back to the UK and Howard's first presentation for the gathering, which will be about his family roots. And this is quite interesting about how names change or evolve depending on your hearing and education and abilities to interpret local dialects. Howard?
Thank you. Okay, it's me again. So this is Dowton to Dalton, or is it Dorton to Dalton? This is my ancestry, and we come from a little village called Garton on the Wold, about 20 miles in from the North Sea, 20 miles north of Hull, on one of the many roads that lead from the coast across to York. And this one goes through Stamford Bridge, which is about 10, 12 miles to the west of Garton. Stamford Bridge, site of the famous battle 1066. The records appear to start in Garton, or they're still in existence from the late 1600s. And the first Dalton that I found was in a marriage in 1719 to an Anne Sykes. It wasn't a hugely successful marriage in that by 1739, poor Anne had died, 2 boys named John had died, and a girl called Anne had died. So he was left with possibly 3 children, a Mary, Anne, and a Thomas, for which there's no further mention in the records. And then there's nothing in Garton on the World records, and for about 30 years. So the hunt was on for where John had gone or what had happened to him. About 6 or 7 miles to the east, out towards the sea, is a very small village. Garton is perhaps 300 people. Ruston Parva is perhaps 150 people. And it's a hamlet near a larger village called Nafferton. And in the records at Ruston Parva, in the 1740s, there was a John and a Mary Dowton, or is it Dorton? And they had a son called John. John's a very popular name in our family. And it was also a very popular Christian name that in those years. They also had a daughter, Margaret, who was born and died age 3, and a son, Thomas, recorded as dying, but there was no trace of his birth. And perhaps the John and the Thomas are significant. The spelling is, as you see it there, Daughton, and I started to suspect that in fact it was Dalton, because it's a name that I'd never seen before, and I've never seen it since. So is it pronounced Dorton, as in Charles Lawton, the famous actor, or is it Downton, as in a town like Towton? And my take on it is that it's probably Dowton. My ancestor, probably, if he is my ancestor, probably when asked the question, and what's your name? John Dowton. And the reasoning that I put to it is that my ancestor, if it is my ancestor, probably couldn't read. He probably couldn't write. And that the vicar was probably not from that part of East Yorkshire, and that the accent would be unfamiliar to him, and he would simply write down what he heard, which is what any registrar is told to do if he has any doubt as to what the person is saying to him. So my take was that he was probably, it was probably Dalton. A number of items of evidence, circumstantial evidence, seem to exist. Back to Garton in 1766, there was a marriage of a John Dalton, and this John Dalton is the head of my tree. I can trace a line from him all the way through to today. And he married a girl called Elizabeth Tate. but neither of them were born in the parish. And in 1767, they had a son, John. But sadly, Elizabeth died about 18 months after the baby was born. He would be under some pressure with a small baby. And in the ruthless times that perhaps you might think it is, he would need to remarry. And curiously, rather than marry a local girl, he went back to Nafferton. I don't know why he would go back to Nafferton with the no girls in Garton or nobody. 7 miles was quite a distance in those days. I'm intrigued as to why he would go back to Nafferton. With this new wife that he married, he had 2 sons, 2 further sons called Thomas. Sadly, they both died from smallpox, but choice of the name Thomas is perhaps interesting. Is it a memory of the previous one that had died? I don't know. I don't know. And then about 25 years ago, I bought a document at a sale somewhere, and this listed residents of the village of Nafferton in 1743. Now, whether these are actually just, it's like a census, the people, the males that live there, or whether they were actually people with renting land, I don't know. But down in the middle of the document is a John Dalton. So in the village, there were Daltons. And is it a coincidence? Perhaps it's the same man. I don't know. But certainly in 1743, the guy DAU GH10, he was there. So in summary, I've listed it as so. Saying Doughton could be Dalton, I think that's a strong possibility. The death of the boy Thomas at Ruston Parva in the 1740s, was he born at Garton? And then 2 attempts later to rear a boy called Thomas. Is that a coincidence? The documents that show that there were Daltons in Nafferton in the 1740s is fact, but perhaps it's not him. And then in 1770, he returned from Garton as a widower and found a wife back in Nafferton. And then my ancestor, Obadiah, who was the grandson of this John that was born in, or that was married in 1766. He was born in Garton, but he married in Nafferton. What is the fascination with Nafferton? I've never got to the bottom of it. But that's the quandary that I have had. And I'm inclined to come down on the side that Doughton is just Dalton, but said with an accent in the vestry on a windy day and the doors open and the vicar isn't from the parish. So I'll leave it with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Back to Michael Ware, please. Michael?
Thank you, David. I'll just share my screen now for my other PowerPoint presentation. Now I'm going back. I too have a John Dalton, and he came from Ireland and ended up in New Zealand. He's my great grandfather. Now, luckily for me, he was a convict. Why I say lucky is because there's quite a few records out there. Now, James, his father, and he were convicted, excuse me, on the 1st of January 1847 on the evidence of the mark of a mouse, or the mark of a dairymaid and the mark of a mouse. I'm not sure whether it was the footprint or the tooth mark. They had been arrested in Castlecombe and Waterford for selling 300 weight of butter. You wonder how much 300 weight is? It's either 336 pounds or 152 kilos, not a small amount. The butter is said to have been carried in 6 firkins or barrels on 2 carts. And the person who claimed to be the owner of the butter was a Daniel Moore from near Castlecombe in Kilkenny. He said he had advertised the loss of the butter and had received information that had been sold in Waterford. He bought his cooper, Michael Brennan, or a barrel maker, to identify the firkins, and Margaret Brennan, his dairymaid, to identify her mark and the mark of the mouse, as I mentioned too. I'm not sure whether it was a tooth mark or a foot mark. William Flood, a Carman stage owner, employee, Nicholas Quigley, recounted that James Dalton, aged 72, and his son, John Dalton, aged 19, had stayed at their establishment at New Ross. The third person in this saga was Hugh Byrne, who was also tried but discharged with severe admonitions. And all of this I found in the record of a court case published in the Kilkenny Journal, January the 2nd, 1847. And I found this when I visited Ireland. It was an amazing find. Now, both James and John were convicted and sentenced for 7 years transportation. James Dalton, who was 72 at that stage, was sent to Spike Prison to be transported on, and I can never say the name of the ship, 3. However, I have not found any evidence of this fact, nor of his death, which is extremely frustrating. Now, John was in prison separately from his father and transported to Tasmania on the same ship with the unpronounceable name, arriving as a 21-year-old in 1849. All of this ties in with that actual first record. And you can see the record there on that screenshot. Also on the transportation record is his next of kin. Now, the person who did this research for my dad actually translated it as Mother Mary or Margaret, Brother Patrick, and Sisters Sally or Mary of the native place, assuming it's Kilkenny. I don't know how anyone else would take that or translate that. Now, when he was in, this is John I'm talking about now, my great-grandfather, he was assigned to Fenton Forest near New Norfolk in the middle of Tasmania. And it can't have been too bad an experience because he named his last son, my grandfather, Brian Fenton. And thanks to David and Karen, these screenshots are their work. And Karen has obviously found, she's got this wonderful photograph of the Fenton Forest estate around the time that he was there, and a little bit of information about James Fenton, a Protestant born in Ireland and a former captain in the British Army. So at least he and John had Irish ancestry, or they wouldn't have been ancestry at that stage. They would have only just arrived. Now, according to his prison record, John was certified free in 1854. And in this record, it also backs up the stealing of butter from Daniel Moore. So it confirms that I think, well, I am on the right track. Now, he married my great-grandmother in 1866, and she was Catherine Markey. And on their marriage record, she's recorded as 16, and he, you'll notice, is recorded 23. He was a bit liberal with his numbers. He was actually 34. But then who would want to marry a woman half your age? So perhaps it was just so it looked good. Now, the Markey family had arrived in Tasmania from Liverpool, and they were also Irish, originating in Louth in 1853, and Catherine was 1 year old. I'm turning the page, so that's why I'm taking a little while. Now, it was rather sadly the following year, he spent another 3 years in prison for larceny. But the really good thing is he was convicted and pleading guilty, I'm reading now, of stealing 5 tusses of hay. However, the constable and the magistrate both said they'd known him one case for 8, 9 or 10 years and the other 16 or 17 years, that he was of good character. It's great for me to hear that. His sentence was for 3 years imprisonment. So he wasn't such a bad character, perhaps. Now, John and Catherine had their first 3 children in Tasmania, and in 1873, they sailed to New Zealand. The next 2 children, Rose and John Bryan, were born in Wellington in the south of New Zealand, the south of the North Island, before they moved to Hawera in Taranaki on the west coast of the North Island in 1881. The following children, Henry Patrick, Catherine, Mary, Florence and Francis, were born between 1880 and 1888. And my grandfather was born in 1891. Now, none of these families have had their birth records in New Zealand at all, and so their dates are based on the death records. Now, both the parents predeceased their children, which is actually sometimes, you know, after listening to Howard, you know, a lot of the children died very early. So Catherine must have been a pretty good mum, I think, and they didn't have things like cholera that they suffered from. Now, John Dalton still appeared in the newspapers after his death. The one on the left is the funeral, and the cortege was a very lengthy one, and he was buried in Mania Cemetery. But the rather amusing thing is he was still supposed to have been appearing in court on a litigation charge between Dalton and Leo. And the unusual thing was of that is that they both, the defendant and the plaintiff, had taken ill and had died before the date of the court hearing. So he's been quite a good person to follow from Tasmania to New Zealand. Just quickly going on, their children, I've got a wonderful photograph of 4 of their last 5 children. Francis is not there, but there's my great grandfather, Brian Fenton, or Fent as he was called, with his very big ears, in that photograph. Kate at the back was his older sister, and who looked after him after his father died in 1905. His mother had died in 1901. Now, Brian Fenton, Fent they called him, was sent to the United States to study dentistry. And Kate had married a dentist, which was probably why he was wanting to follow that. And in New Zealand, they had fairly recently started a dentistry school down in Dunedin. But by October 1915, he had joined the Canadian Overseas Expeditionary Force in Sarnia in Ontario. But he deserted on March 1916, he's listed as a deserter. And he'd returned to New Zealand, where in May 1970, he enlisted in the New Zealand Expeditionary Force, stating he had one dependent child named John Bryan, born June 1915. We've got no record of that. And my father, who was an only son, spent a lot of his time looking for this half brother of his. He served in the Middle East and was discharged in New Zealand in May 1919. And his brother, Brian John, had died in London as a result of gunshot wounds that he received in Gallipoli in August 1915. I just wonder whether Brian John was named, his John Fent's son had been named after his uncle who had died. Fent had married my grandmother Charity Ann Beard in 1921, but sadly Fenton was killed in a motor vehicle accident, yes, a motor vehicle accident in 1924. So my dad was only 2 and never knew his father. So there's no stories passed on, and my grandmother said that she was so in love with her husband. When he told her he had stories to tell, I love you anyway. Don't want to hear those stories. So we don't know anything about his experience, his time in Ontario, and the possibility of a child. Now, James, John, Brian, and Francis were the only ones with the Dalton surname. And only 2 of those had sons. Patrick and Fenton had both 1 son each. And of their descendants, there are only 4 3 times great grandsons with the Dalton name from 10 children. So we haven't got a lot to go on if we're going to be doing Y DNA. I have used my nephew Mark to do a Y, and thanks to Mark and Karen, we're finding out a little bit more. So my big brick wall is, and I've got to come to my brick wall, was where and when was James Dalton, John's father, born? Where and when was John Dalton born? And he would have been born about 1827 in Kilkenny somewhere. That's a huge issue. Who was John's mother? His children listed her as Mary Coney on his death certificate. Did John have brothers and sisters? Are those the ones on that record? And what about the stories of Fenton marrying a divorcee in US or Canada and having a child? There's still a lot to solve. And it's Ireland that I am looking for answers from. Anyway, that's my story. I hope you've enjoyed that.
Sorry, I had to take a breath. That is just an amazing adventure. It's got to be time to talk about DNA. So I'm going to ask Mark Woolahan to give us his update on the Dalton DNA project. Mark?
I'm going to try and keep it to around 20 minutes so that we can hear the grand finale. I'm excited to hear Kieran play. Okay, so I plan to finish the the annual written report next month. So these are some of the things that I plan to talk about over here. My contact information is over here on the right side of the screen. So if anyone needs to contact me, all my contact information is here. And just some of my previous experience. I worked with a few organizations identifying John Does and Jane Does and trans Does, using DNA and genealogy to identify the missing persons. Genome sequencing, so very related to the project here. So I'm going to talk about the progress we've made since last year. Last year in October, we created a GEDmatch project, which now I believe has 138 members, or DNA kits anyway. And in November, I completely revamped the Dalton International DNA Project page at familytreedna.com. I'll show you guys that in 1 second here. In January of this year, we rolled out the Big Y DNA test plan, which was a huge success. I selected specific members of each genetic family, and Karen sent out an email explaining what we were doing. And we've had, I believe, 12 Big Y DNA test upgrades because of that. And now we get to do some pretty cool stuff with the data, which is I started making phylogenetic trees from the SNP data. So the Big Y data that we received, I've reviewed and created the phylogenetic trees. The focus areas right now are the Y DNA, the Big Y DNA, and the GEDmatch project. The neglected areas, I haven't started analyzing the mitochondrial DNA yet. I do plan to take a look at that and write some information about that as well. So you can just type Dalton Y DNA. And for me, it's showing up as the first one here on the results. So this is the project page here. So if you'd like to join our project, you just click this join button right here, and then it'll ask you to sign in with an email address and a password. If you're not a member of familytreedna.com, you can make a membership account and purchase either the autosomal DNA test or the Y DNA test through them. So we updated it. We put pictures here. We updated all the tabs with information. Karen and I worked on this quite a bit. And you can see that on the surnames tab here, we have 249 Daltons in the project right now out of our 310 members. And 7 with the DAU spelling and 4 with the DOL spelling. Now, the most exciting part of the DNA project page is the results. I prefer the colorized chart. So this is all of the members of the DNA project that have chosen to make their results available to the public. Their names are anonymized, but so you can see the first group here, the yellow group is group A, genetic family A. That's what we're talking about in the chat there. The second group here is genetic family B, genetic family C, genetic family D, E, and so on. So the groupings here are grouped by haplogroup and by short tandem repeats, which are these numbers here. So your haplogroup is a branch point in the tree of life. So it starts with genetic Adam is what we call them. And every male on this planet is related to genetic Adam. So let me go back to my slides. So this top of this tree diagram here would be genetic Adam. And then everybody is related to genetic Adam somehow. If you're in haplogroup I, you're down here. If you're in haplogroup, well, most people are in what's called RM269, and that would be R1b down here at the very end. Now we do have a few members that are in I and a few members that are in E. So short tandem repeats is what we were looking at with all those numbers on that screen. And that's what you get when you do the 12 marker, 25, 37, 67, or 111 marker tests at familytreedna.com. These are Y-DNA tests, basic Y-DNA tests. And the problem with the STR markers is sometimes there's what's called back mutations. So you can kind of group people together based on their short tandem repeats. So this is repeats of the base pairs in the DNA. Let's say there's CGG, CGG, CGG 12 times right here for this member. So these are just at specific markers. These numbers up top tell you the point in the DNA. So they label each area of your DNA with a grouping of numbers up top here. And then these numbers down here, 12, 25, 14, these numbers are how many times the pattern repeats in your DNA. So you can see here that some have 12 on this first marker and some have 13. So what happens is we try and group people together that have the same numbers all the way across, but mutations occur and you either lose a set of those repeats or you can gain a set of repeats. And that generally happens generation to generation. So your son may have, 12 markers here where you had 13 repeats at that location. But what happens is what's called back mutations, which make these kind of unreliable. So back mutations would be like if my son had 12 markers, I have 13, but my son has 12 markers. But then his son gains a pair, so he has 13. He goes back to the original like me. So that would be called a back mutation. So that kind of makes it hard to estimate how far back in time these repeats occurred. Another thing is called convergence. So you can imagine, because of these mutations that occur, they can keep occurring and keep occurring until you're almost all the way over to the Fitzpatricks, which are very genetically close to, to our groups. But I'm just saying, like, these numbers could change so dramatically over generation that they could almost look identical to another family. And that's called convergence. And then there's unknown mutation rates. So your son could have all the exact same markers as you, but then his son could have 3 of those numbers that are different from yours. It's completely random how it happens. So SNPs are a little bit more reliable. These are known as single nucleotide polymorphisms. And the SNPs are what constitute your haplogroups. So haplogroups are just branch points in the tree. So as we were looking at this tree here, the branch here between A and the rest of them, that branch point right here is the A haplogroup branch point. So that's what a haplogroup is. So with SNPs, there's very, very seldom back mutations. Once a son inherits a mutation from his father, he has it and he gives it to all of his sons. There's not a whole lot of variation in that. There's no known convergence. The mutations for the single nucleotide polymorphisms, they happen at specific points in your DNA, and it is very, very, very rare for someone else to have the exact same mutation as you got in this occurrence. So these are also easier to estimate the time, genealogical time reference as to common ancestors, because they're more reliable because they, on average, mutate every other generation, where short tandem repeats mutate every generation. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes you could have 2 or 3 generations where they don't mutate. But it seems like single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs, are more stable in their mutations with every other generation. So I've talked quite a bit about SNPs. The big Y test is the SNP test at Family Tree DNA. It's very expensive, which is why I was shocked when we had 12 members upgrade their DNA tests when we sent out the email. Is if you are a member at Family Tree DNA, see how some of these spaces are blank here for the common ancestor, or the oldest known ancestor. I'm gonna just run through how to update that real quick. So this is what it looks like when you log in. So you go up here to account settings. Just click on your name, and then this drops down, go to account settings. So then you would go to the genealogy tab, and earliest known ancestors right here. So then this is the field where you put in your oldest known Dalton ancestor, and you could put other information like who he married, when he was born, when he died. But you can also please place the country of origin if you know. And if your oldest known ancestor, you just know he's from Ireland, and you can just put Ireland. But if you're not really sure, then I would say put US. And then you could do the same for your maternal ancestor. This is helpful for mitochondrial DNA testing. We started a GEDmatch project. Ancestor project is what they call it. GEDmatch is a free website. It uses autosomal DNA, not Y-DNA. Y-DNA is, I'm going to just use the basic understanding of XY as a male and XX as a female. So Y-DNA only comes from father to son, and females do not have Y-DNA. So autosomal DNA are your other chromosomes besides your sex chromosomes. So this is what you get when you do a test at ancestry.com. At familytreedna.com, they call their autosomal DNA test Family Finder. You can upload to GEDmatch from any DNA testing company, Ancestry23, MyHeritage, Family Tree. And that's what makes the website really useful, is because if you've already looked at all your matches on Ancestry, you can upload to this website and see if you have matches from 23andMe, MyHeritage. You could see if you have matches from familytreedna.com. So this website right here has step-by-step instructions on how to download your DNA. So to join the GEDmatch project, you have to download your DNA from one of these companies and upload it onto the GEDmatch website. And then once you've uploaded your DNA onto the GEDmatch website, there we are. And then you just click this join button here. And then there's going to be two fields asking why you want to join the project and other things you're a member of, just to give us some information about the members that are joining. And then you select which kit you want to join, and then you click submit. If you notice that you submit an application to join the project and it's been a few days and we haven't admitted you, just send one of us an email, and Karen or I can go on and admit you to the project. So once you join the project, here's what you can do with it. Go back down to the Ancestor Projects link. And then you put in your kit number here. Oops, that's not it. That's it. So you put in your GEDmatch number. So when you upload your DNA to GEDmatch, they'll assign you a number for your DNA kit. And then once you do that, you just submit. And then it populates a list of all the members of the project that you match DNA with. Gives you their kit number, their name, whether they have a tree or not, the chromosome that you match on, how many centimorgans of DNA that you share, their email address, and optional Y or mitochondrial DNA haplogroup, and where they uploaded from. I'm just going to cover that real quick here. I'm going to try. So on familytreedna.com, when you join our project, you can join with autosomal DNA. You don't have to have Y DNA to join our project. So women can join the Dalton International DNA Project as well. This is an added benefit to it. So I'm actually going to use my hand project to show this example. familytreedna.com account. Eventually you'll get something that looks like this, where you get your Y DNA results there, and your Family Finder autosomal DNA results here, your matches. But you want to go down here to additional tests and tools and go to advanced matches. Now, once you're in this advanced matches group, you can select the Dalton International DNA Project. Let's go a few more now. And you have to select which test you want to compare your results with. So Family Finder is the autosomal tests. So in this case, it does the same thing as the other one, like GEDmatch. It just returns a list of all the members of the project that you have DNA matches with. So now I get to the juicy stuff, the phylogenetic trees that I created. Genetic family A here first, because there's some significant changes. We had two members here that both share a common ancestor. Okay, I'm still here. All right, so two members that have the same ancestor, Reuben, and because they both upgraded their tests to big Y, family tree DNA populated the SNPs all the way down and assigned Reuben a SNP number, a single nucleotide polymorphism. So this is the mutation that Reuben had that his father did not have. And all of his descendants have this mutation right here. So what's cool about this is you can see this third member here. His ancestors were from the same area. But you can see that the tree splits here, and he does not have this mutation. He has these mutations here, but he doesn't have Reuben's mutation. So that means that James's father or grandfather or great-grandfather was Reuben's father. So if I were these three members, I would definitely be looking closely at these trees from each other and trying to connect the dots. But if your brick wall is Reuben, I would look very closely at John Flanagan Dalton, because he's probably Reuben's brother. And Robert Sr. is probably Reuben's father. Or this might be Reuben's uncle, and John Flanagan is Reuben's cousin, but they're really close. So I would be definitely looking into these trees here if you're one of these three members. And poor member over here, he is also in genetic family A. He was placed there a long time ago, but he is not related to the rest of genetic family A back to 300 AD. So if more members upgrade their Y-DNA tests, I'm sure he will have more matches in genetic family A to work with. But you can see his path is Canada to England, where these members were all Tennessee and Virginia. So one thing that's neat about this is now that we have Reuben here with a number, any member that thinks that they have Reuben as an ancestor, they can do a single SNP test at Family Tree DNA for $39. They can test to see if they have this SNP right here. Oops, I didn't mean to block that out. They can test to see if they have this SNP right here. And if they do, then that means that Reuben is in fact their ancestor. So if you were adopted, you could then probably figure out who your biological father is that way. So let me show you the tree for genetic family D now. Genetic family D, we do not have any known common ancestors between any of the members, but you can see the tree is doing some cool stuff here with all of the SNP, the big Y SNP tests. You can see that perhaps these three were brothers, and these guys were brothers, and these guys were brothers, and these three were brothers. So you can kind of see how that works as like a tree. Now these big blocks here with multiple numbers in them, that just means that there's additional SNPs here that they haven't been able to sort out yet. So as more people do big Y DNA tests, they'll say, oh, well, this guy over here has this SNP, but no one else does. So we'll just make a branch off the tree over here and put this number here over here, and then branch it down to the person that took the test. So that's how these big blocks get separated. Now, if you look at this block here with just two numbers, if this member right here had his brother do a big Y DNA test, which is not necessary, by the way, but if he did, they would be able to delineate these two numbers. They would assign them to whoever they belong to, basically. Let's say their father had 1512495. They would both have that SNP, and they would both branch from that same SNP. So if you were really enthralled in this stuff and you wanted to see, exactly which family member had which number applied, you could test known family members and know it that way. Well, that's all that I have. Let me go back to my slides. Yep, so I plan to put out another big Y target testing plan here soon. I plan to send out another bulk email at Family Tree DNA to invite members to join the DNA project. And do some social media. I want to put together a group of videos explaining some of this stuff. So these are my goals for the project. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out, and enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Mark. That was fascinating, and I think I understood most of it. Karen and others who are really into the DNA, and I saw a number of members posting their kit numbers, which is great. That's part of what we want to do at gatherings, is have communication. And now for a pleasant way to end the evening or begin your mid-morning or right before your dinner, depending on your area in the world, I'd like to ask Kieran and Colette Dalton to now close us out with some beautiful songs.
Well, thank you very much. From Colette and myself, and thank you for the invitation to keep you awake for another 2 hours. We're going to play, Howard was talking about, saying about people should dance. Maybe they could have some kind of a digital dance, I don't know. But what we're going to kind of do tonight with the selection we have is like in the old days in Ireland, they had what they call rambling houses. And people went to certain houses were better rambler houses than others. There'd be more meat in the sandwiches, if you know what I mean, in certain houses. You know. And but the people they lived for these social nights, and they'd be telling yarns, and they'd be playing music. And the only person who often wasn't invited was the priest. They wanted to have a bit of fun, and we didn't want anything to hold back. So if you think of the selection we have tonight is in that vein, the rambling house, as we call it. And we're going to start with two hornpipes. And hornpipes they were kind of showy dances. They were single dances. And hornpipe, incidentally, is often said it originated in England, or in England, because all the old music collections has loads of hornpipes in England. So nevertheless, it was a very popular dance here, and often a solo dance. So another thing about Irish tunes is they're nearly often named after the musician who gave you the tune. Nobody concerned about who composed them, but it's where you got the tune. So we play two hornpipes. The first one is called Stack of Wheat, and the second one is called the Galway. that's the hornpipes. You probably know as well that we in Ireland we have a great tradition of songs. Loads of songs about everything: football matches, greyhounds, this, that, and the other. But we also have a great tradition of songs in Irish, and I'd say it's not too often you hear an Irish song. So we're going to sing an Irish song tonight. Begin Camara, Oscailga, Gaelic. And briefly, it's about a young girl. She wants to go to the fair. The fair was a great social thing in Ireland, the buying and selling and the telling yarns and the matchmaking, yes, and not to mention the few drinks, and not to mention the old fight, a bit of a fight as well sometimes. But this is the young girl wants to go, and her mother is telling her that she's too young to go to the fair. Again, Camara, Cunde and Clara is County Clare. Begin Camara, Cunde and Clara. Begin Camara, Cunde and Clara. Begin Camara, Cunde and Clara. Come, may money back, may. It's a water in a leggy to Canadian. So in a leggy to Canadian. So in a leggy to Canadian. A pony no Canadian. Need to a bird. Need to a dan over hang their folks. Need to a dan over hang their folks. I've 2, 3 there back to more. So in a leggy to Canadian. So in a leggy to Canadian. So in a leggy to Canadian. A pony no Canadian. Barlam hang more greasy brock. Barlam hang more greasy brock. Barlam hang more greasy brock. I have a cock on the radio. This water in a leggy to Canadian. So water in a leggy to Canadian. So water in a leggy to Canadian. Morning no Canadian. So water in a leggy to Canadian. So water in a leggy to Canadian. So water in a leggy to Canadian. A morning no Canadian. Now, I hope you got all that. Did you get all that? I'll be asking questions afterwards about it. The next thing we'd like to do, it really would be nicer, absolutely nicer to have played this on a harp, but we haven't got one. But this is a tune called Planxty Reynolds, and it comes from the creation of a famous Irish harper in the late 1800s, called Turlough O'Carolan. And his music is terribly, for a long time it lay idle, but it's become, that's my dogs barking in case you're wondering. They don't like banjo.
That's right.
But anyway, Carolan.
It's not chat. Q&A.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. See. Sorry.
Carolan traveled around to houses, and he had a very clever way of making a living, of getting around. He was blind, the poor man, but he composed a tune in honor of the patron of the house where he stayed. So this is one, it's a short one, and it's called Planxty Reynolds. And the word Planxty is, they think, is a sort of a tribute to or in honor of the man's name was Reynolds. So Planxty Reynolds. the Carolyn tune. Thank you. This time, sorry. Yeah, oh, the waltzes, yeah, of course. Really part, what was really part of the old rambling houses were the waltzes. Waltzes were very popular and still are. You know, it was a great way of people getting together. So we play with the rambling house in mind. We play two old Irish waltzes. The stone outside Dan Murphy's door was a house where this big limestone rock was outside, and the people used to meet there and talk and discuss. And the second tune, well, with a bit of luck, it might be the Wild Colonial Boy. Right. The stone outside Dan Murphy's door. Wild Colonial Boy, a very popular song in Ireland to this day. Can I want to do? You want to do? Yeah. Is it? Want to introduce it there?
I'm going to do a song from Northern Ireland, and like a lot of Irish songs, it's kind of a drinking song.
Yeah.
Now you tell me.
There, right? So raise your glasses.
No, your glasses. Right.
Kind friends and companions, come join me in rhyme. Come lift up your voices in chorus with mine. So here's a health to the company, and one to my lass. Let's drink and be merry, all out of one glass. Let's drink and be merry, all grief to refrain, for we may and might never all meet here again. So here's a health to the wee lass that I love so well. For grace and for beauty, there's none can excel. She smiles at my countenance as she sits on my knee. Sure, there's no one on earth is as happy as me. So here's a health to the company, and one to my lass. Let's drink and be merry, all out of one glass. Let's drink and be merry, all grief to refrain, for we may and might never all meet here again.
Yeah. That's maybe I suppose we should yeah, the music we like from our fellow Gaels, music from Scotland, and we'll try one or two Scottish tunes. Right, anyway. First one is called Speed Bonnie Boat. It's a beautiful, beautiful tune, and it tells the story of Bonnie Prince Charlie, one of the stewards, the last of the stewards who tried to regain his kingdom, but was unsuccessful. But he was hidden in Skye when they came looking for him. The Sky Boat song.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
I just wanted to interject that I did put up a poll while you were playing, and I don't know if you've seen all of the wonderful comments that you're getting about your song. So thank you so much. And please, if you want to continue on, you have 30 people listening.
Yeah, well, I'm glad my relations rang in, like I asked them, because they wouldn't be getting anything for Christmas if they didn't do it. But that's the best about all this DNA. You end up having more relations than you started out with.
Yeah.
We're getting nearly time to be finishing up, so we're going to play polka dances are very, very popular, especially here in Kerry. So we're going to finish up one or two fast ones. And thank you all for listening. We enjoyed playing. Just to give a kind of a random selection. It's not all reels and 2,000 miles an hour. There are beautiful melodies out there, and we like to try and play them when we can. Okay. So thank you all for listening. As we say over in Ireland, we suffered for our music. That was your turn to suffer then. No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And what a treat to actually hear Gaelic sung.
Don't hear it often.
And with that, I want to thank all of the panelists, all of the members and non-members that chose to join us this evening, this morning, and tomorrow, depending on your time zone again. And we look forward to more questions and more comments and conversations about Daltons and their history, no matter the island, nation, or planet. There's probably a Dalton on Mars. And if there is, we want to hear from them.
Yeah, that's right.
And get them to take a DNA test.
Absolutely.
But I knew a Dalton and he went to Mars, but he left it. He didn't like it. You know why he didn't like it?
Why didn't he like it?
Because there's no atmosphere there. That's what he said.
There you go.
And with that, cheers all, and thank you again.
Good night. Good
Thanks,
night.
everyone.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
everybody. Good night.
Good night.
And thanks to David and
Karen
Karen
and Howard.
and Howard.
Yes.